I campaigned twice. 5 years ago, that wasn't a very serious attempt because I had only 10 days to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
This year, I tried again, and that was a much more serious attempt. The contest, as usual, is very competitive. But this time, I'm glad to say, there are no black materials. There is no mudslinging and not much personal attacks, and that is a good thing.
What do you make of your own performance this time?
I tried my best, and the feedback is that I produced the most comprehensive policy platforms. I spent the least amount of money. So on the whole, I think my campaign was cost effective, even though I failed to get enough nominations.
Some suggesting rising concerns about the future of Hong Kong, given the different views about where its future lies. What do you make of it, Mrs. Ip? Not as a candidate this time, but rather as a Hong Kong citizen.
I think the greatest change is in our economic influence and our position in the country. In 20, 30 years ago, we monopolized the China trade. We were practically the sole channel for trade and investment in and out of the mainland. And we certainly contributed a lot to China's modernization. But now a lot of the mainland cities, particularly those in the Pearl River Delta, they are able to do what we have been doing. And actually, cities in the mainland are more innovative than Hong Kong, And although we are still the freest economy and most competitive by some accounts, our long-term competitiveness is questionable. And home prices have risen too much. The wealth gap has widened. So there is more anxiety in our society now than 20 years ago. But that's a global phenomenon.
It is a global phenomenon. And Mrs. Ip, you and some of the other elites in Hong Kong are concerned about that. But, some of the Hong Kong people that I talk to on the streets seem to suggest that, leave us alone, they say. We don't want to be that competitive. We just want to have an easy life.
There are people who say that the younger generation is becoming like the young generation in Japan, a low aspiration generation. We don't want development. We don't want more infrastructure. We don't want more population. We just want to live a simple life, bicycling in our countryside. But what they overlooked is if we don't move forward, we will be left behind. Currently, they still have an easy life because our government has a massive reserve, a lot of money in our treasury. We can afford to top up minimum wage. We can afford to provide a lot of welfare benefits. But in 20 years' time, with aging population, we won't be able to afford that. But not all young people in the 20s and 30s are like what you described, low aspiration, low ambition. Actually, the achievement gap, the aspiration gap is pretty wide. You still have some very high achievers who want to reach out, who want to get to the top, and who want to stay competitive. It is the business of our government to bridge the gap.
Talking about the young people, Mrs. Ip, I'm sure you are very familiar with the work of the police force and the security in Hong Kong because you've been working for decades on that. What do you think about an apparent conflict between the young people, or at least some of those young people in Hong Kong, and the police force last year?
The young people who got involved in violent acts in Mongkok and during Occupy Central, a lot of them are actually those engaged in low-skill manual work. Some of the young people charged, they are transport workers, cooks, typically, just like young people in other parts of the world who get into trouble. They work long hours, they do tough manual work, and sometimes they explode, But so on the one hand, while we need to provide more opportunities for young people, our justice system also need to produce sufficient deterrence to make sure such young people don't step out of the line.
What kind of deterrence are you talking about, Mrs. Ip?
Those who have broken the law, they ought to be brought to justice. And our justice system is slowly coming to grips with that, because take Occupy Central, hundreds of people have been involved. The Mong Kok riots, also large number of young people. Our Justice Department is step by step taking prosecution action against them.
What about the police force? There have been so much debate in Hong Kong, even beyond, about whether the police in that specific case have been properly handled, or the punishment for them, whether it's justified or not. What do you say?
I think under no circumstances can the authorities condone law enforcement officers breaking the law, even though many of them did act under extremely stressful circumstances, you know. My sympathies go out to all those who have been charged, you know. But I don't think we can quarrel with the courts about the judgment or the sentences. But I think the tremendous contributions made by the police force in the past few years in upholding law and order must be recognized. They've gone through a lot, you know, they've taken on a lot of stress and insults, and they've really done a lot in upholding the stability of Hong Kong.
You have been tough. I mean, tough in terms of surviving politically in Hong Kong. What is it that it takes a woman being toppled down on several occasions by different factors, and always try to get back once again on her feet?
Well, I think I'm by nature a workaholic. I can't stand still, you know. I like being busy. I like keeping myself busy.
That is decided by nature. Is that what you're saying, Mrs. Yip?
Partly so, and also because of my love of Hong Kong. You know, I was local born and bred. I benefited from Hong Kong's prosperity. I benefited from the opportunities from the reunification. Without the reunification, I wouldn't have made it to be Secretary for Security, you know. So I thought I should help our young people, you know, help our city continue to grow. In fact, that's the aspiration. That's not only my aspiration, also the aspiration of fellow graduates of my generation to do something for our city.
You have been accused by some of your opponents earlier in different campaigns as being too directly talking and using the tough words against so-called the public, and also always speak your mind, even not even diplomatic enough.
Those accusations were made against me 13, 14 years ago when I was handling the Article 23 legislation.
That's true.
Since then, I have gained more experience and learned to handle public communication with more skills. I think anyone who wants to survive in government and politics need to learn that, you know. And I think I've come a long way. I no longer speak in the tactless way that I used to when I was 13, 14 years ago. I've learned my lessons, you know. How you sell is just like in business. How you sell a product is very important. It's more effective to soft sell rather than to hard sell. My principles remain the same, but I no longer talk in the same way. The greatest sensitivity now in Hong Kong is with the continuous rise of our motherland, you know. There's a sense of reversal of role. There are a lot of Hong Kong people who used to feel superior, frankly, superior to mainlanders. Now it's the other way around. Mainland visitors, they're far wealthier than Hong Kong people, far more competitive, a lot of highly educated elites working in the top jobs in our city. So there is a sense that we are losing out, even a sense that we are being belittled. So a Hong Kong leader must speak in a way to the Hong Kong people so as to restore their confidence and to give them hope.
What about that? I mean, Hong Kong SAR government, even though we talk about them a lot in the headlines, they are really new, only 20 years, very new government. What do you think the different generations of the administration in Hong Kong or SAR government have been their lessons that we should learn today, including many of our colleagues right now in the government?
Firstly, governing Hong Kong is far more complex today than in the before 1997, because now we have democratic development. We have regular elections. If you look at elections in the West, look at UK, look at USA, look at France, you'll know that whenever you have referenda or elections, there will be an explosion of public demands, aspirations, all the hidden conflicts and tensions will come to the fore. So officials have a lot more to handle than in the past. That's point number one. Secondly, you see, in Hong Kong historically, it's an economic city. The best people go into business, all the professions. People who want steady jobs go into government. So we have really a dearth of people who are really committed to politics and governance, who are willing to jump into the frying pan, irrespective of salaries, irrespective of possible personal insults, loss of privacy and freedom. So that's why it's been very hard for our incoming chief executive, Mrs. Carrie Lam, to find sufficient people, good people, willing to serve in her cabinet. She said it has been a nightmare.
I understand you have been, after some government work, went abroad and study literature as well as doing research about democracy systems around the world. I wondered what have been some of the takeaways you got from the academic studies, and you think that Hong Kong could, in a way, try to digest and apply?
Well, the democracy scholars in Hong Kong, they look down on our democratic system enshrined in the Basic Law because it is a limited system. It is a system appropriate to our status as a special administrative region, not a country. We cannot have a democratic system which cuts off the central authorities. We cannot have a system which is appropriate to an independent country but not appropriate to Hong Kong.
There are those that do not agree with you about what kinds of a democracy system Hong Kong should apply. What do you think at the end of the day is the basic principle of this debate?
I think the core issue is whether you're willing to stick to the Basic Law. In effect, whether you're willing to accept Hong Kong's status as a special administrative region of China rather than do what you please, That is really the crux of the question. But I think most Hong Kong people regret our inability to pass the chief executive election package back in 2015. If we had passed that, we would have had universal suffrage a couple of months ago.
People are looking at, particularly from outside Hong Kong, the efficiency of Hong Kong, which has been the crystallization of the spirit for Hong Kong over the decades.
Yeah.
But it seems that things are being debated and debated and debated, and without much result, whether it's building an art gallery or try to refurbish a street or try to build some housing for the common people. Do you worry about that? Or this is a necessary learning process of democracy in Hong Kong? Do you need to pay a price for it?
We are already paying a price. For example, our public works project, our public works budget for the year is 100 billion Hong Kong dollars. But so far we spent maybe only 10 billion, a tenth of that. We've only approved maybe just 10 billion, and that deeply affects our construction industry and related services. It's because with democracy, we now have filibuster, that is drawing out the discussion process in LegCo, so that in the past we used to be able to approve one item in 40 minutes. Now it takes 3 hours, and that's slowing Hong Kong down. a lot of us are very worried. The business community is very worried.
Is there a way to solve it?
Not at the moment, except by moral suasion, by telling the public, that we can't carry on like this, getting more common sense into my colleagues in the Legislative Council who like to indulge in filibustering, use public pressure to get our legislators to change tack. It's very hard to change the system. That's a very big price we pay for democracy.
That's true. Having said that, though, Mrs. Ip, Hong Kong is moving on 20 years already. And you
Yes.
personally, in Hong Kong, serving in and out of the government, all of these rich experience and dramatic days have make you who you are today.
The most traumatic experience for me is the controversy over enactment of national security legislation. The mass protest against Article 23 in 2013. For me, naturally, the most traumatic and dramatic experience. It's also my deepest regret that after 20 years, Hong Kong still not able to honor this constitutional obligation. I think if we want the central government to give us universal suffrage, honor their promise, we also need to honor our obligation. And I hope the new government, the new administration, will be able to achieve that.
And about yourself, Mrs. Ip, your daughter was born at the late 80s. Hong Kong future is going to be hers and her peers. At the end of our show and interview today, anything you want to say to her and her friends?
In fact, I'll tell you what she's been telling me.
Okay.
She's been working in Shanghai. She's been working in Shanghai in a very competitive environment. And where she is concerned, the market is most important. She will go where there is a big market. It means our country.